Hey everyone, I'm Henry. I'm a professor of philosophy and religion, and I'm also a spiritual director and I've worked in various communities for decades. So today is day 20, and I want to talk about the health aspects of alcohol. One of the reasons I've been talking with you that I've changed my view on alcohol is because of the studies that have shown that there is probably no health benefit, especially for heart or cardiac issues. There were studies that compared alcohol drinkers with non-drinkers, and they, in the 90s, 80s, and 90s, showed that people who drank alcohol, especially red wine, had better outcomes than those who didn't drink. So it was the idea that red wine is good for your heart, alcohol is good for your heart, and it makes us feel good. So maybe that's true. They thought, and these studies seem to show that. But the studies were flawed. Current research since 2010 is showing basically the group of people, the cohort, the group of people who were the non-drinkers had a lot of sick people in that group because a lot of people who are on medication could not drink. And there were a lot of sick quitters. There were a lot of alcoholics in that non-drinking group. So they had stopped drinking, but they had done so much damage to their livers and their body generally that they had bad health outcomes. So it was sort of unfair to compare moderate alcohol drinkers with the group of non-drinkers because many of them were sick. Another reason is that many of them were very poor. Alcohol's expensive, wine's expensive. So a lot of very poor people who have not great access to health care were also in that group of non-drinkers. And also the cohort or group of people who are drinkers who drink wine. Wine's very expensive, actually, as a form of alcohol. So if people are wine drinkers, that means they have a higher income, which also means people with a higher income usually have better health insurance, better access to health care. They tend to be more highly educated, and they tend to take better care of themselves generally. So you are adding in that group to the moderate drinkers group. So you can do your own research on that. Hopefully I'll have time to cover that more. I want to talk about some of what Dr. Jerry Devlin has said in the Heart Foundation. And basically they're saying that there is no real benefit to drinking alcohol. In fact, it seems that there's some bad health outcomes from that. Dr. Devlin is quoted as saying, "No matter where you are on the scale of alcohol consumption, the less is better." So even moderate consumption, you're better off not consuming if you're interested in helping your heart. Our latest guidance, he says, is important because it provides greater certainty about the effect of alcohol on heart disease outcomes and indicates that there is no protective effect from alcohol. So Dr. Jerry Devlin, you can do your own research on that, and that's pretty telling, pretty across the board. Dr. Devlin says if you have elevated blood pressure, probably that reducing your alcohol consumption will help lower high blood pressure. Also, it will help with rhythm disorders of the heart, atrial fibrillation, and so reducing alcohol can be helpful there based on his studies. So in his view, the evidence is very clear. Dr. George Laking, who is an oncologist or cancer doctor, cancer researcher, said that there is a clear association with drinking alcohol and more cancer. The more booze, the more cancer. That needs to be understood. In the same way people understand that too much sunlight can cause cancer. So here we have alcohol increases your risk of heart disease, most likely, and increases your risk of cancer. And so it's not the case that there's this great protective effect of alcohol. And that makes sense because you look at what your body does with alcohol. Your body removes alcohol. So alcohol is not really part of the normal functioning of the digestive system, or it's not a normal part of our blood or brain. So the liver removes it. And alcohol is found in decaying fruits, fruits that may be a little overripe, and through the body's own digestive processes. So the body has found a way to remove alcohol. So it makes sense that this would not be something helpful, because if it really were helpful, maybe the body wouldn't make such an effort to get rid of it. Let's move to another researcher, Dr. Krishna Aragan, and she writes that the findings affirm that alcohol intake should not be recommended to improve cardiovascular health. Rather, reducing alcohol intake will likely reduce cardiovascular risk in all individuals. And that depends on how much people use. So if you use a lot of alcohol, you'll see a much greater reduction of your risk. So that's Dr. Krishna Aragan. There was a study published in JAMA called Association Between Daily Alcohol Intake and Risk of All-Cause Mortality. Dr. Jinhui Zhao, Z-H-A-O. And that was published in JAMA Network Open 2023. And from the introduction, they talk about why some of the past studies of alcohol use were imperfect. Mounting evidence suggests that associations might be due to systemic biases that affected many of these previous studies. For example, light and moderate drinkers are systematically healthier than current abstainers on a range of health indicators, unlikely to be associated with alcohol use. So these moderate users have better dental hygiene, exercise routines, diet, weight, income. Lifetime abstainers may be systematically biased towards poorer health. Studies failed to control for biases in the abstainer reference group, in particular failing to remove sick quitters or former drinkers, so that the group of the non-drinkers that group has these sick quitters, former drinkers, former alcoholics whose health is really bad. They finally given it up, but it's sort of too late. Or people who have diseases for which they cannot take alcohol because of the medications that they're on. So you have that group. And most studies have non-representative samples, leading to an overrepresentation of older white men. So they've noticed a sort of a bias in that, and older white men may be healthier than others. Adjustment of cohort samples or groups of people to make them more representative has been shown to eliminate apparent protective associations. So just by changing the group of who you're comparing, drinkers and non-drinkers, it gets rid of that small amount of protective association that was thought to be there. So those are some of the details that the study goes into. That the group of drinkers compared with non-drinkers, the non-drinkers has a group of those sick quitters, former alcoholics, former heavy drinkers that are sick, and they get sick, so it makes people in the moderate drinking group appear healthier compared with that other group. So that's how these studies seem to work. You compare groups of people, drinkers and non-drinkers. You don't really, can't really just show, oh, one individual person drinks moderately. Is that helping them or hurting them? You have to do a statistical study of many, many different people. And so those statistical studies can be easily flawed by how you select who is in which group. So the end result appears to be what the statisticians, medical researchers are telling us, that there is no cardiac protective effect of alcohol consumption. In fact, they think probably it's increasing your risk. I also want to recommend a YouTube video by Daniel Huberman, who is a medical researcher at Stanford University School of Medicine. And check for his almost 2-hour video, what alcohol does to your body, brain, and health. So he takes a very science-based approach. And he lists a lot of problems with alcohol. And one of them he mentions at 1 hour and 3 minutes to 6 minutes is the anxiety that can come from when people stop drinking, even if they're light drinkers, the next day or even 2 days later, cortisol levels can be higher. Cortisol is a stress hormone, right? And what he says that when you have a higher cortisol level, you feel some anxiety, nervousness, you feel something's wrong, you don't feel well. So that is, I think, really a key aspect. Alcohol is a very powerful drug. We've known that. We've talked about that. And it appears that the effects of alcohol are much longer lasting than we as average people may not really appreciate. But I think if we look at the spirituality and psychology of it, if we're really attuned to what we are experiencing, we can say, yeah, I've noticed a day or two after not having alcohol means I do feel a little bit anxious. And that's part of the addictive quality of alcohol, is that, now you feel anxious, and having imbibing, taking in some alcohol would alleviate that in the moment, but just kick the bucket down the road, kick the can down the road. So that becomes part of why it is a part of the price you have to pay, part of why it's addictive, because you're paying that price in the next day with higher cortisol levels, according to Daniel Huberman. And that does make sense. And even if that isn't particularly true, which I believe it is, I think that's something I have experienced, that when I am enjoying some alcohol for 2 or 3 days on the weekend, I notice the next day, not having it there, I feel a little bit anxious, and it may be as a result of this cortisol level increase. It is something I experience when I'm attuned to what I'm experiencing, which is how I'm defining a large part of spirituality. And that's part of the price that you have to factor in with the good feelings you had Friday and Saturday night at 8 and later. Now you have to pay the price because of these long-term effects of alcohol. Long-term meaning several days. Even when the alcohol is flushed out of your system, it has changed your system. Daniel Huberman also talks about resveratrol at 1 hour 33 to 35 minutes. And he states that the studies have shown that resveratrol has no real effect at the level that people would be drinking in wine. You'd have to drink a large amount of wine to see any benefits, and then the benefits are just not there for resveratrol. Although he mentioned that if you're someone who enjoys 1 to 4 glasses a week, and that gives you such a sense of stress reduction or happiness with friends, maybe that is a benefit. But I would say again, well, you could get that benefit without drinking the alcohol. But nevertheless, resveratrol is not necessarily helping our hearts. And at 11 minutes, Daniel Huberman talks about how alcohol kills bacteria, and it has been used for that purposes. So if alcohol kills bacteria and people are drinking a lot, they're getting it in their stomach, their intestines, he says it can and does kill our good bacteria in our gut, our microbiome that we need for a lot of reasons. And that can lead to issues in our intestines and our digestive system. So there's a negative there as well. You're having all that alcohol, which is poisonous for most of the bacteria there, and that can lead to health issues too. So that's another negative in terms of health. So this idea that alcohol is healthful, something that helps our health, especially our heart health, we're finding that's not true, but we're having these easily seen negative impacts to our health. There was one major study, alcohol's impact on the cardiovascular system, Peter Anderson, that did show some positive outcomes for ischemic disease. So there may be some benefit for some people, but the same study noticed that it increases high blood pressure, especially in men, and so it's not recommended. Here's another interesting article, The Sick Quitter Effect, How Alcohol Can Seem Cardioprotective When It Isn't, by Dr. Christopher Labos. And he talks about the various aspects. In large amounts in the long term, alcohol will cause liver damage, cirrhosis. It also increases the risk for cancer, especially breast cancer. And it also seems to be toxic to cardiac cells, and also can cause the holiday heart system, where people who don't usually drink that much drink a lot, especially on vacation, and it could lead to palpitations and arrhythmias, where the heart is beating in not the right rhythm. People don't get sick because they abstain from alcohol. They abstain from alcohol because they got sick. So those sick quitters can really skew the results of these studies. So again, we have yet another doctor saying that there really is no cardiac benefit, and also there are definite cardiac problems with consuming alcohol. And I'll look at one more because this has been important for me. Here's an article entitled, Is It Better to Drink a Little Alcohol Than None at All? By Dr. Michael Greger. And so he asks, is moderate drinking really protective? Or is it just something about the people who abstain completely from alcohol that puts them in a higher risk category? The reason we suspect something fishy is going on is that abstainers seem to be at a higher risk of a whole swath of diseases, including liver cirrhosis. And then he talks about there's a difference between people who are lifelong abstainers versus those who have quit. And so how could drinking a little bit be linked to lower rates of liver cirrhosis? Well, let's think about it. What makes more sense? Drinking leads to less liver cirrhosis, or liver cirrhosis leads to less drinking? In other words, this is reverse causation, or the sick quitter effect that we've been talked about. And what's interesting here is that he ties this in with studies of smokers. And often you see higher mortality rates among those who quit smoking compared with those who continue smoking. Well, why would that be? Quitting smoking would be good for you. But the reason is because the reason they quit smoking is because they got sick. And of course, sick people die more often than less sick people. So it's almost like too late. You've injured your body, you have cancer, you have cirrhosis of the liver, and now you've stopped drinking, stopped smoking, but now you're in that group of non-smokers, non-drinkers, but you're very sick. and that takes the statistics of that group down, which lifts up the group of moderate drinkers. And he thinks that that has really skewed these studies, and that there really is no major heart benefit, cardiac benefit overall with drinking moderately. So it's not a healthy thing to do. And go back to Daniel Huberman's YouTube video podcast, and you will see there's a whole slew of negative health effects from the consumption of alcohol. So not only we're not getting that great cardiac benefit that we thought, but we're getting lots of other health problems.